Picture this, a night at 8,300 meters, with no sleeping bag. For Maurice and Liliane Berard, the world's highest couple, this wasn't some fatal accident. It was part of their strategy. In the summer of 1986, on the unforgiving slopes of K2, they challenged the death zone itself, betting everything on speed and light weight. But why would the elite of world mountaineering break the #1 rule of survival, effectively signing their own death warrant? This is a story of how reckless courage collides with icy eternity. That summer, 13 of the planet's best climbers wouldn't return home. The year is 1986, and K2, the savage mountain, is no longer forgiving mistakes. We find ourselves at base camp, at the foot of the second highest peak in the world. There's a strange energy here. Tents are packed tightly together, you can hear a dozen different languages, and the air is thick with ambition and adrenaline. Never before has this brutal pyramid of rock and ice seen such a crowd. But behind all this colorful chaos, a grim statistic is taking shape. This season will go down in history not as a triumph of the sport, but as the Black Summer. And at the center of all the attention, two figures. They stand out from the crowd of grizzled loners, Maurice and Liliane Berard. They're French, beautiful, self-assured, and inseparable. The newspapers and their sponsors have already dubbed them the world's highest couple. For them, it seems the mountains aren't a struggle for survival, but more like a romantic stroll at extreme altitude. Just look at their gear, minimalist, no bulky oxygen tanks. They preach the alpine style. It's a bold philosophy. Move fast, travel light, relying only on your own lungs and your speed. It's elegant, a purist's approach. The Berards believe that speed is safety. If you're fast, you spend less time in the danger zone, but K2 has other ideas. Right now, with the sun bathing the slopes, no one suspects that the death of this star couple will come to symbolize the end of an era when it seemed that love and a light backpack could protect you from the ruthless elements at 8,000 meters. We see them checking their bindings, smiling for the cameras. There's no fear in their eyes, only excitement. They don't yet know that the mountain has already set its traps, and the countdown to the Black Summer has begun. Have you ever tried to calm down an angry teenager who has zero respect for anything? Maurice Berard does it every single day. In his ordinary life, far from the icy winds, this quiet man with the weather-beaten face is a youth worker. His clients are troubled teens from the wrong side of the tracks. Kid society has already written off. It's a job that can wear down your soul faster than climbing Everest. But it's also what gave Maurice his greatest weapon: inhuman patience. Look at him now. Amid the chaos of base camp, people arguing over routes, pots and pans clattering, the wind tearing at the tents, Maurice is completely calm. Years of dealing with other people's anger and pain taught him how to wait. He can diffuse a conflict with a single glance. Here, in the death zone, where panic is a death sentence, his mental fortitude is worth more than the warmest down jacket. He treats the mountain like another difficult client, temperamental, dangerous, but one you can understand if you just listen closely. Maurice is the bedrock of their partnership, its public face and voice of reason. But glance over his shoulder. Standing next to him, often in his shadow, you'll see a petite figure. That's Liliane. If Maurice is the soul of the team, then Liliane is its body and its mechanic. She's a physical therapist by training. She knows the human body inside and out. While other climbers guess whether their bodies can handle the strain, Liliane knows. She feels the limits of every muscle and sinew. She's the expedition's doctor and chief diagnostician. Her pack is always assembled with the meticulous precision of a medic, where every single gram counts. To the press and their sponsors, Liliane is often in the shadow of her charismatic husband. Journalists love interviewing Maurice. He waxes poetic, speaking beautifully about the mountains. Liliane, on the other hand, is silently checking the gear. But this modesty is deceptive. Inside this seemingly fragile woman burns an ambition that could melt a glacier. She isn't just along for the ride. Liliane has her own relentless goal. She's obsessed with becoming the first woman to reach summits where no other woman has stood before. She wants to prove to the world that women's mountaineering is not some secondary discipline. Her drive is the fuel that powers their duo. Maurice provides the stability. Liliane sets the pace. It's a perfect symbiosis, his social worker's composure and her medical precision. amplified by a thirst for records. They seem invincible, like two halves of a whole, purpose-built for survival in extreme conditions. It seems they've accounted for everything, from their mental fortitude to their physical conditioning. The person you're meant to conquer the world with might, at first, not even let you on the team. And that's exactly how their story begins, in 1973. We journey back 13 years to the rugged landscapes of the Peruvian Andes. Here, Maurice Berard is the undisputed authority, the stern leader of the expedition. He looks at a young Liliane Bontemps and sees, well, anything but a partner for taking on the peaks. For him, she's a tourist. Maurice delivers a blunt verdict. You'll come with us, but just for the trekking. No serious climbs. He draws a safe route for her on the map, reserving the real mountains for the main squad. It's the classic male confidence of the era. A woman on an expedition was seen as a liability, someone to be protected. But Liliane doesn't argue. She simply shoulders her pack and hits the trail. And this is where Maurice's preconceptions begin to shatter. While the men are gasping on the steep inclines, fighting the thin Andean air, Liliane maintains a steady pace. She never falls a single step behind. Where the others demand a rest, she's checking the map. Her endurance proves to be phenomenal, and her technical work with the gear is impeccable. Watching her, Maurice has a surprising realization. This woman needs no protection. At some point, it dawns on him that she's tougher than many of the men in his group. The skepticism in his eyes gives way to respect. He's no longer seeing just a travel companion, but an equal partner, someone who can endure hardship and the cold without a single complaint. This trial in Peru is what forges the foundation of their bond. 4 years later, in 1977, they make it official and become husband and wife. But this is no ordinary marriage. Their home, in the quiet village of Francourville, loses all sense of cozy domesticity. Forget soft couches and flowers on the windowsill. Their home becomes a full-blown training camp. The walls are plastered with topographic maps of the Himalayas and the Karakoram. The corners are crammed with coils of rope, carabiners, and ice axes. The kitchen becomes a laboratory for calculating calories for future treks, and the living room, a mission planning headquarters. The Berards' life now revolves entirely around a single purpose: the mountains. They live in a state of constant readiness, where every single day is prep for the next record attempt. Their neighbors see a normal couple, but behind closed doors in Francourville, the world's highest couple is in the making, preparing to challenge any summit on Earth, trying to conquer the most dangerous peak in the world while dragging an entire city behind you. It's an absurd task, but a very real one. This is exactly what the French national expedition to K2 in 1979 looks like. And Maurice Berard isn't just another climber on this trip. He's a major figure, the head of the elite Himalayan section of the French Alpine Club. He's a man who plays by the old-school rulebook, and those rules declare you wear the mountain down. It's a strategy known as a siege. You can just picture it, an endless snake of people snaking its way to the base of the mountain. Just think about the numbers, hundreds, even thousands of porters. They're hauling tons of gear on their backs, everything from heavy oxygen cylinders to folding furniture and crates of gourmet food. This looks less like a feat of athleticism and more like a military operation to seize territory. The logic of a siege is simple. You lay down miles of fixed ropes, establish a chain of camps, flood the mountain with gear, and then, slowly, step by step, you basically push someone to the top. But K2 just laughs at this lumbering armada. The whole machine starts to break down. The sheer number of people creates chaos, not safety. Orders get lost down the chain of command, cargo gets bogged down on the lower slopes, and the weather shifts faster than this huge expedition can even move a tent. Maurice sees it with his own eyes. This giant machine of an expedition is choking on its own weight. And the mountain has no patience for delay. The French team, for all its immense resources and ambition, fails spectacularly. They retreat without ever reaching the summit. For Maurice, it's a brutal wake-up call. He realizes that the system he had devoted himself to is broken. It's obsolete. And at that very same moment, somewhere on a nearby peak, a lone climber is rewriting the rules of the game. Reinhold Messner. This man from Tyrol is doing the impossible. Climbing 8,000ers without oxygen, traveling light, as if he's out for a morning jog. He's proving that in the thin air, speed is the only real defense against death. Maurice looks at Messner's approach and compares it to the clumsy, lumbering monster he was just a part of. The contrast is staggering. Berard realizes oxygen tanks are an anchor, and a crowd of people is just an illusion of safety. His entire mindset shifts. He decides he'll never again be just a cog in some huge machine. From now on, his path is the Alpine style. Just a small team, just him and the people he trusts with his life. He returns to France a changed man, ready to strip away everything non-essential for the sake of pure speed and freedom. Your jacket might weigh 3 kilograms, but at 8,000 meters, it feels like 30. In the death zone, every extra gram of gear becomes a stone, dragging you down. Maurice Berard understands this better than anyone. After the fiasco with the heavy military-style tactics, he realizes a chilling truth. The off-the-shelf gear is just not built for his ambitions. It's too bulky, too cold, and made for tourists, not for gladiators of the vertical world. If the industry can't give him the protection he needs, he'll create it himself. Picture a cramped garage cluttered with fabric scraps. This isn't some sterile science lab, but it's here that a revolution is about to begin. Maurice joins forces with a talented engineer, André Van de Putte. The air is thick with down feathers and the smell of synthetics. They work like obsessed tailors, but they're not crafting suits. They're building spacesuits for venturing into the void. Their main enemy? Cold spots. These are the microscopic seams where icy winds can suck the heat right out of your body in a matter of seconds. You can just imagine André sketching out a new design. This is no longer just a simple quilted jacket. They invent the H-box system. Picture a brick wall, but instead of bricks, you have compartments filled with goose down, separated by vertical fabric partitions. This structure stops the down from clumping together, creating an unbroken shield of warm air around the climber. But warmth isn't enough. You also need freedom. Maurice knows how a climber moves at their absolute limit. When lifting your arm takes a colossal amount of energy, your gear can't be fighting you every step of the way. So they develop an anatomical cut. They literally sculpt the suit to fit the body of someone who is actively climbing. The sleeves and knees are pre-shaped. This means the fabric no longer pulls tight, and it won't constrict blood flow. And this is absolutely critical, because at that altitude, poor circulation means instantaneous frostbite. And so the non-ox concept is born. Gear designed specifically for those climbing without an oxygen mask. Berard's logic is simple and brutal. Without supplemental oxygen, your blood thickens, your metabolism slows, and your body essentially stops generating its own heat. At minus 40 degrees, your outer shell becomes the only thing standing between you and freezing to death. The result of all those sleepless nights and endless tests is the brand Valandre. This is more than just a logo on a sleeve. It's battle-tested armor. Now, they don't just have the right strategy. They have a technical edge that lets them take on the planet's most brutal conditions. Creating the perfect suit is one thing, but now they have to risk their lives to prove it works. The year is 1980, and the time for theoretical debates is over. We're at the base of Gasherbrum Y, the 11th highest peak in the world, a reclusive giant standing 8,080 meters tall, tucked away deep in the Karakoram Range. But there's no bustling army of thousands of porters this time, just silence. Instead, we see a tiny group of people looking almost defenseless against the immense wall of ice. Maurice Berard is here to prove a point. He's not just choosing a peak, he's choosing a line no one has ever climbed before, the Southwest Ridge, a razor-sharp edge slicing right through the sky. Roped up with him is Georges Narbeau, and they're moving unnervingly fast. Take a look at their packs, stripped down to the bare essentials, nothing but what they absolutely need, and a whole lot of self-belief. This feels less like an assault and more like a surgical strike. They're not building bulky camps. They just climb, sleeping wherever darkness catches them. This is Alpine style in its purest form. And with every step on the ridge's virgin snow, they're proving one thing. Their new lightweight gear works. They're warm. They're agile. They're moving faster than the weather. But let's head back down to base camp. Here, binoculars in hand, is Liliane. She isn't on the summit push this time. She's part of the support team, but her role is just as critical. Imagine the tension. She sees two tiny specks crawling up that vertical wall, knowing that a single shift in the wind could send them plummeting into the void. She's their lifeline to the world below, their mission control, their guardian angel. For her, every minute of waiting feels longer than the hours of climbing do for the men up high. Her eyes are glued to the ridge. She's analyzing their pace, watching the clouds, mentally taking every single step right alongside Maurice. And then, the Specs reach the summit. A victory. Maurice and George are standing on top of Gasherbrum Spau, the first to ever conquer this route. They've done what was considered a suicide mission for such a small team. For Maurice, this success is sweeter than any champagne. It's more than just a conquered mountain. It's ironclad proof that the old era of siege-style mountaineering is over. He descends with a new certainty. Speed is survival, and his vision for lightweight climbing, well, that's not the future anymore. It's happening right now. Family reunions usually happen around a dinner table, not in the death zone, where every breath is a struggle. But for the Berards, the idea of a family vacation means something entirely different. The year is 1982, and the setting has barely changed. We're back in the Karakoram, but this time, the target is Gasherbrum II, the neighboring peak, soaring to 8,035 meters. This time, Maurice isn't leaving Liliane behind with the binoculars. She's strapping on her crampons, checking her harness, and roping up right beside her husband, and they're not alone. Take a look at the third member of this wild expedition. This is Alain Bontemps, Liliane's own brother. This is no longer just a climbing team. It's a true family clan, throwing down a challenge to the vertical world. The stakes are now higher than ever. If the mountain decides to turn on them, an entire family is on the line. We see them making their way up. Their style hasn't changed. It's fast and bold. No oxygen masks to hide their faces. They're breathing air so thin, it's barely more life-sustaining than a vacuum, yet their pace is astonishing. Liliane, who many saw as just the shadow of her famous husband, is tackling the route with a terrifying efficiency. She doesn't ask for help. She carries her own weight and makes decisions right alongside the men. In these moments, she is shattering the stereotype of the weaker sex in the high mountains. Brother and sister, husband and wife, their team works like a single, well-oiled machine, where trust is more important than the strength of any rope. And then, the moment of truth. The trio is standing on the summit. Around them, there's nothing but the sky and the peaks of other 8,000ers. It's an absolute success. They descend as victors, and this is where a new force comes into play. The media. Journalists instantly fall in love with the story. Photos of the beautiful, smiling couple against a backdrop of glistening snow spread across the pages of newspapers and magazines. The world doesn't see frostbitten, exhausted survivors, but radiant heroes. It's after this ascent that their title as the Stars of Alpinism is truly cemented. Sponsors start lining up. A glossy, almost cinematic image begins to form. The perfect tandem, bringing love and harmony to a place where only the cold usually reigns. To the public, they become a symbol that romance is possible even in the harshest environments on the planet. The Berards are no longer just athletes, they're a brand, and this success opens the door to their most ambitious projects yet. There are places on the map that seem off-limits to women, seemingly forbidden by nature and statistics alike. Nanga Parbat is one of those places. The year is 1984. After their success on the Gasherbrums, the Berards are looking for a new challenge, and their eyes turn to a giant standing 8,126 meters tall. In the world of mountaineering, this peak has a sinister reputation. They call it the Killer Mountain. For a long time, it held the grim distinction of having the highest death toll, surpassing even Everest. The faces here are steeper, avalanches strike without warning, and the weather changes with catastrophic speed. This isn't just a mountain, it's a vertical labyrinth that chews up and spits out even the strongest expeditions. Maurice and Liliane approach the base of the Diamir face. It's one of the most difficult and longest faces in the world, kilometers of ice and rock reaching straight into the stratosphere. The standard route is of no interest to them. True to their philosophy, they choose their own unique line up the mountain. Once again, they're climbing without oxygen, and again, they're traveling light. But this time, the air is practically buzzing with a special kind of tension. You see, up to this point, no woman in human history had ever stood on the summit of Nanga Parbat. It was as if the mountain itself was pushing back, rejecting any attempt to break into its rugged, all-male club. We're watching Liliane now. She's not just her husband's support anymore. She's the tip of the spear. On the Diamir face, where a single misstep means a fall into the abyss, her technique is just fantastic. The icy wind threatens to rip them from the slope. The thin air clouds the mind, triggering hallucinations. But Liliane keeps pushing upward. She's rewriting history in real time. Her tiny figure, set against that colossal wall, seems to defy all logic of survival. And then, the final few meters. Liliane Barrard takes that final step. Anne stands tall on the summit. It's a triumph. She is the first woman to ever look out at the world from the summit of Nanga Parbat, and come back to tell the tale. This moment changes everything. If skeptics had ever whispered that her success was just due to her husband, those whispers now fall silent, forever. Liliane takes her place among the world's elite climbers, regardless of gender. She's proven her endurance has no limits. After the descent to base camp, you can see a new, steely confidence in her eyes. She knows now. There's no height she can't reach. That feeling of personal power is more intoxicating than any wine. Liliane and Maurice are at the peak of their powers, and they feel like they've finally cracked the code to survival in the high mountains. 30 meters, just 30 meters separating them from the summit. But that distance feels longer than the entire journey from France to the Himalayas. It's spring of 1986, just a couple of months before the main event. The setting changes. Now, we're at Makalu, the Black Giant, the 5th highest mountain on Earth. Maurice and Liliane are on the very cusp of triumph. The summit is so close, it feels like you could reach out and touch it, even toss a snowball at it. But at that very moment, nature decides to show them who's really in charge. A monstrous storm slams into the ridge. The wind is so powerful, it doesn't just knock you over. It stops you from even taking a breath. It's like an invisible wall, one that even the strongest cannot break through. The situation is like a set of scales. On one side, years of training, their ambition, and those precious 30 meters. On the other, instant death from the cold or from a fall. Maurice makes the only right decision, but it's an agonizing one. They turn back, with the summit in plain sight. That decision takes far more courage than the climb itself. But that retreat leaves a deep psychological scar. It's the effect of unfinished business. The mind simply refuses to accept that all that effort was for nothing. Instead of going home to rest and recover, they make a fatal mistake. They immediately shift their focus to K2. But just look at their physical state. The human body isn't a machine where you can just change the oil. 2 8,000ers in a single season is an unimaginable load. The attempt on Makalu had already burned through their reserves. Their muscles are exhausted. Their blood has thickened from the prolonged time at high altitude, and their nervous systems are stretched taut, like a guitar string. They aren't heading to Pakistan as rested athletes at the top of their game. They're coming as people desperate for redemption. At this point, K2 is no longer just a mountain to climb. It's a way to finally get some closure, to prove to themselves and to the world that their failure on Makalu was just a fluke. They see the world's second highest peak as the only way to make up for that spring disaster. This thirst for a comeback is dulling their survival instincts. They're about to take on the most dangerous mountain on the planet, carrying the heavy weight of exhaustion and a bruised ego that's pushing them forward, forcing them to ignore their own body's warning signs. A dream worth a fortune could vanish forever, on the back seat of an old dusty taxi. And it's at this very moment, not with their first step onto the glacier, that their expedition to K2 really begins. We're in Rawalpindi, June 1986. The heat is suffocating. The city roars, hums, and stinks of gasoline. This is where a unique Franco-Polish alliance comes together. Just look at this team. Besides our heroes, Maurice and Liliane, the group is joined by Michel Parmentier, a journalist and a formidable climber. And rounding out the foursome is the legendary Wanda Rutkiewicz, the Iron Lady of Polish mountaineering. It's a true dream team, a global all-star lineup where every single member is a top-tier legend. With professionals like these, what could possibly go wrong? But disaster strikes out of nowhere. Maurice Barrard, the very man famous for his ice-cool composure and meticulous planning, gets out of the taxi, and leaves a bag behind. And this isn't just any bag, it holds the entire expedition budget. Wads of cash, climbing permits, passports, tickets, all the logistics, all the plans. The team's entire future is sitting in a worn-out bag, speeding off to God knows where in the labyrinth of this Asian megacity. For the next few hours, the group is in a state of shock. Just imagine that sickening feeling of dread. You're on the verge of the greatest adventure of your life, but you're utterly helpless. Without those papers and that money, they're nobody. Just a bunch of tourists stranded in Pakistan. We can see the look on their faces change. Wanda Rutkiewicz, a woman used to iron discipline, stares at her leader in disbelief. Michelle is chain-smoking. Lilian tries to keep a straight face, but you could cut the tension with a knife. Of course, fate gives them a second chance. They manage to get the bag back, a one-in-a-million miracle. The money and documents are all there. They can finally breathe a sigh of relief. But the damage is done. The atmosphere within the team is irreparably changed. This incident becomes the first crack in the foundation of their trust. The team members are left with a silent, nagging question. If their leader can lose his head and fall apart in a city, what's going to happen up there, in the death zone, where a single mistake costs you not your money, but your life? The invisible thread of Maurice's authority is stretched to its breaking point. Instead of unity and a fighting spirit, they're now carrying a new kind of baggage to base camp, a heavy load of doubt and unspoken resentment. Financially, the expedition is saved, but psychologically, it's already starting to stall before they've even laid eyes on the mountain. Imagine being trapped inside a nylon cage while a freight train thunders past, just inches from your face. That's exactly what a storm sounds like on the slopes of K2. We're now in June. Any lingering doubts from Rawalpindi quickly give way to the harsh reality of the climb. The team leaves the relative comfort of base camp and starts their ascent. Remember their guiding principle? No high-altitude porters. It might sound noble in an interview, but out here on the ice, it means one thing: brutal, back-breaking work. Maurice, Lilian, Wanda, and Michelle effectively become their own pack mules. They're the ones hauling the tents, the stoves, the food, the ropes. Every step up is a battle against gravity, amplified by the crushing weight of their packs. They're burning a colossal amount of energy just to haul themselves and all their gear up to 7,000 meters. And that's when the mountain springs its trap. The sky darkens, the barometric pressure plummets. And then, the blizzard hits. This isn't just a snowstorm, it's a complete whiteout, a wall of white that seals them off from the rest of the world. They are pinned down at 7,000 meters. In a normal life, 9 days is a short vacation. But up here, in the thin air, 9 days of being forced to do nothing. It's a slow execution. At first it might feel like just a break, a chance to recover. But that's an illusion. At this altitude, the body doesn't recover. Even lying still in a sleeping bag, just breathing, your body is working overtime, fighting for every molecule of the desperately scarce oxygen. A silent, terrifying process kicks in. The body begins to consume itself. The very muscles they've trained for so long start to burn away, becoming fuel just to stay alive. The tension inside the tents is ratcheting up. You have 4 powerful personalities, trapped in a space so cramped they can't even stand up. Outside, the wind is howling, a sound that drowns out all thought. Inside, a different storm is brewing: anxiety. Their food is running low. They have to ration the fuel needed to melt snow for water. Instead of building strength for the final push, they're growing weaker by the hour. That deep-seated fatigue from Makalu, the one they'd tried so hard to ignore, comes roaring back with a vengeance. So, by the time the wind finally dies down and the sun hits the slopes again, the people who crawl out of the tents aren't well-rested athletes. They're haggard prisoners of the mountain. The storm didn't just steal their time, it stole their reserves, their physical edge. And now they face an impossible choice: descend and lose all their hard-won acclimatization, or push upward, running on fumes. K2 has already landed its first punch, and it didn't even have to let them get near the summit. The mountain simply made them wait, letting time and the thin air do its destructive work for it. Have you ever seen people who are incredibly close act like complete strangers when faced with a life-or-death situation? Because that's the strange, unsettling scene that plays out on June 18th as the team sets out for their final push. They leave camp, but there's none of the effortless grace they took such pride in earlier. It's more like watching a film in slow motion. Just look at the ropes. They're coiled up, clipped to their packs. Maurice and Liliane Berard, that picture-perfect climbing couple, are not roped together. It's a flagrant violation of every safety rule in the book, but at this altitude, logic itself begins to warp. A rope means safety, but it's also dead weight, and it tethers you to your partner's pace. Right now, they're all so drained from being cooped up in a tent for 9 days that they're subconsciously trying to shed every ounce of weight, even if that weight is the very bond with the person they love. So they climb alone, spreading out across the slope like a long, broken chain. We're now climbing higher, to 7,400 meters. Up here, the air has only a third of its normal oxygen. And then, something happens. Something that should have been a warning sign, as loud and clear as a siren. Liliane Berard, the same woman who was practically running up peaks just a short while ago, suddenly comes to a dead stop in front of a sérac. It's a wall of ice. An obstacle an experienced climber would normally scale in 30, maybe 40 minutes tops. But Liliane is stuck. We can see her trying again and again to kick her crampons into the solid ice, but she just doesn't have the strength to pull herself up. Her movements are sluggish, uncoordinated. An hour goes by, then 2, 3, 4 hours. She spends 4 hours fighting this single wall of ice, burning through precious daylight and what little energy she has left. It's a catastrophic waste of time. In mountaineering, there's a hard and fast rule. If you're this slow at the start of your summit push, you're heading for disaster. It's the simple math of survival. And where is Maurice in all this? He sees it. As the leader, as her husband, he needs to make a clear-headed call. Every single sign is screaming, turn back. Liliane's body is showing clear signs of system failure. But hypoxia is a treacherous enemy. It dulls your fear, your critical thinking, leaving just one obsessive thought: go up. Maurice says nothing. No one utters the one phrase that could save them. We're turning back. Instead of making the tough call that could change everything, the group presses on. They're ignoring reality, hoping for a second wind, or that sheer willpower can somehow overcome physical collapse. They just step over this critical moment and keep crawling upward into the zone from which there may be no return. Have you ever tried to sleep with 3 other people in the back seat of a compact car, parked inside a walk-in freezer? Because that's pretty much what the night before our hero's greatest triumph feels like. It's June 22nd. The group has dragged themselves to 8,300 meters. They're in the infamous bottleneck, a narrow, treacherous gully directly beneath a massive, overhanging ice cliff. The air here is so thin, a match won't even light. Every single movement takes a conscious act of will, and it's here, on a tiny ledge they've carved out of the slope, that they do something that defies all logic. They pitch a tent. Just one. A single 2-person tent. For 4 adults in full high-altitude gear. But the tightness isn't the real shocker. Take a look inside their packs. They're empty. In their push for alpine style and speed, they left their sleeping bags behind. It's a radical choice. Shave off a few kilograms of weight at the cost of warmth. Their entire strategy is built on a faith in technology. Maurice and Liliane are convinced their high-tech Valandre down suits can handle anything. The plan sounds insane. Just get through the night, huddled together, still in their gear. But a night on K2 is merciless. The sun vanishes, and the temperature instantly plummets to below minus 30 degrees. Inside the tent, a hellish game of human Tetris begins. Maurice, Liliane, Wanda, and Michel struggle to find any position where they can even breathe. No one can stretch out their legs. No one can lie down. They're just sitting there, contorted, a tangle of limbs. The cold seeps up from below, through the thin tent floor, straight into their bones. Their down suits are working, but they're designed for movement, not for staying motionless on ice. This isn't a rest before the final push. This is sleepless torture. Instead of recovering, their bodies are burning colossal amounts of energy just to generate heat. Their hearts pound, struggling to pump thickening blood through their veins. Every tiny shift causes irritation and pain for everyone else. The psychological tension inside this nylon trap is at a breaking point. When the first rays of sunlight finally touch the slope, It's not elite athletes full of strength who emerge from the tent. It's four shadows crawling out. They're dehydrated, their muscles are stiff, and their minds are clouded by hypoxia and sleep deprivation. Their weight-saving strategy has backfired spectacularly. They saved energy on the ascent, but they've lost every ounce of their physical reserves in a single night, curled up like embryos at the edge of the world. After that night from hell, with four people huddled in that tight, icy tomb of a tent, the morning arrives with a mocking beauty. It's the early morning of June 23rd. It's as if nature itself is apologizing for the previous day's storm. The wind dies down to a dead calm. The sky is a deep ultramarine, and the visibility is perfect. This is one of K2's rarest gifts, a window of absolute calm. It should be the perfect moment for the team's triumph. But just look at how they move. The three French climbers, Maurice, Liliane, and Michel, emerge from the tent slowly, almost as if in a dream. That cold, sleepless night has drained them of all their drive. But there's one person who refuses to succumb to the exhaustion: Wanda Rutkiewicz. The Polish mountaineer seems to hit an internal afterburner. She doesn't wait for the others. While the French climbers are still trying to work the stiffness from their muscles just to get themselves moving, Wanda is already on her way. She breaks away. At this moment, she's not part of a team anymore. She's a lone warrior. Her pace is astounding. At an altitude where a single step can take 10 breaths, she moves with a steady rhythmic cadence. She can feel history breathing down her neck. This isn't a race against rivals. It's a race against time and against her own body. We watch her figure shrink against the backdrop of the giant snow-covered dome. She conquers the last few meters of the infamous bottleneck and begins the final traverse to the summit. And then, the moment comes. Sometime between 10:15 and 11 a.m., Wanda Rutkiewicz takes one final step and stops. She's standing in a place where the only thing higher is space itself. She is on the summit of K2. Just think about the scale of this. Until that very moment, the world's second highest peak had been exclusively male territory. Wanda shatters that barrier. She becomes the first woman in human history to stand atop the Savage Mountain. She's there all alone, bathed in sunlight, a conqueror, proving to the world that the weaker sex is nothing more than a foolish stereotype. But what does she do next? Wanda pulls out a piece of paper and a pencil. She's writing a note, which she'll hide under a flat stone as proof of her summit. She writes her name. And then, something happens that is both moving and strangely chilling. Next to her own name, she carefully writes the name Liliane Barrard. But Liliane isn't on the summit yet. She's somewhere far below, battling hypoxia and sheer exhaustion. But Wanda is so certain of her friend's success, or perhaps so desperate to share this triumph, that she writes her into history ahead of time. She tucks the note under the stone, saving a place for Liliane not just in the record books, but in eternity itself. Wanda spends about an hour on the summit, waiting for the others, but the horizon remains empty. There's no sign of the French team. Realizing she can't wait any longer, she begins her descent, leaving the summit empty and silent, waiting for the next act in this drama to unfold. Triumph at the cruising altitude of a jetliner rarely looks like a celebration. More often, it's an agonizing struggle for every single breath. Just 30 minutes after Wanda Rutkiewicz began her descent, 3 more figures crawl onto the summit. It's Maurice, Liliane, and Michel. They're here. They've made it. But if you're expecting joyful embraces and leaps of celebration, you'd be wrong. Look at their faces, hidden behind dark goggles and layers of frost. They're like masks from a Greek tragedy, frozen in a grimace of sheer, utter exhaustion. Liliane Barrard officially writes her name into the history books. She is now the second woman in the world to set foot on the summit of K2. And even more importantly, the entire team of 4 did it without supplemental oxygen. This was the pure style that Maurice had dreamed of. But the price for this purity would prove to be immense. At 8,611 meters, the atmosphere is so thin, the brain operates with a terrifying lag, like an old, struggling computer. The climbers pull out their cameras, the click of a shutter, then another. They take the shots destined for magazine covers, sponsor flags, a panorama that steals your breath. Below them, the entire Karakoram range unfolds, the border of China and Pakistan, an endless sea of jagged peaks. But they have no strength to savor the view. Their bodies are critically dehydrated. The blood in their veins is as thick as syrup, and their hearts struggle to pump it through their bodies. Every extra moment spent up here, on the roof of the world, brings them closer to irreversible damage. They understand that the summit is only the halfway point, and often it's the easiest half. There is no euphoria, just the dull, heavy realization that they have to get down. The sun, which had offered a brief moment of warmth, is already starting to dip toward the west, shifting the light, stretching the shadows long across the snow. This is their cue. The group turns around and begins the long descent, back toward the one tiny tent, perched at 8,300 meters. The descent demands every last ounce of concentration, but their legs are completely spent, their coordination shot. The same gravity that fought them on the way up is now dragging them down, way too fast. They move like sleepwalkers, consumed by a single thought, a sip of water, and the chance to finally stretch their legs. They're returning to the death zone, to the very same bivouac that offered them no rest last night. And now they face another night without sleeping bags, but this time they are physically shattered. Have you ever willingly walked into a trap, simply because you didn't have the strength to take a single step to escape? That's exactly what happens on the evening of June 23rd, as the team stumbles back into the tent. They're back at 8,300 meters. You'd think the worst was over, but what they're actually doing is willingly stepping into a tiger's cage. Mountaineering 101 is screaming, "Get down!" Every minute spent at this altitude is lethal, but Maurice Berard, the experienced leader, makes a call that seems like a lifeline, but is actually a trap. He says, "We're staying." He insists on a second night. Look at Wanda and Michelle. They don't argue. They simply don't have the energy to protest. Their will is paralyzed by a crushing exhaustion, and the simple prospect of closing their eyes feels like a gift. But in that moment, the silence inside the tent is shattered, not by the howl of the wind, but by an unnerving absence of sound. The gas stove is silent. The canisters, empty. They're out of fuel. It might sound trivial, but at 8,000 meters, it's a death sentence. No fuel means no melting snow, and no melted snow means no water. And without water, a human body in the death zone begins to desiccate, to mummify, in a matter of hours. They try chewing on bits of ice, but it's useless. The thirst becomes an agonizing torture. Their bodies, already battered by the assault on the summit, have hit a physiological wall. A terrifying process begins inside them. The blood in their veins starts to thicken, turning into a viscous sludge, like engine oil in the freezing cold. The heart is forced into overdrive, straining to pump this sludge through their vessels. Their extremities begin to freeze from the inside out, as life-giving warmth can no longer reach their fingers and toes. But the greatest danger is what's happening in their minds. Starved of oxygen by that thick, slow-moving blood, the brain itself begins to swell. Reality begins to fray at the edges. Critical thought evaporates. They sit huddled in the cramped space, with no sleeping bags, shivering from a cold that sinks right into their bones. This isn't sleep. It's a descent into a comatose stupor. They're pinning their hopes on the morning, hoping it will bring relief. But in reality, this single night without water has set in motion an irreversible chain of collapse. Their bodies are beginning to shut down, one system after another. By sunrise, they won't be a team of elite athletes anymore, but three human beings teetering on the very edge of existence, where every single movement demands a superhuman act of will. The brilliant blue sky above K2 is the cruelest lie nature can tell, because it always ends without warning. The morning of June 24th arrives, and with it, the illusion of safety shatters. The wind, which had slept through the night, now awakens with a furious, terrifying power. In an instant, the sky is choked with lead-gray clouds, and it begins. The one thing every climber dreads, a whiteout. It's a condition where snow isn't just falling down. It's blasting up from the ground and hitting you from all sides. The horizon simply evaporates. You can no longer tell the difference between the sky and the ground, and in this icy chaos, the group starts to splinter. Michel Parmentier is the first to react. A primal instinct for survival just takes over. He knows that waiting for the others means staying here forever. Michel plunges into the swirling white, desperately trying to find the path down to the next camp before his tracks are completely erased. He pushes on, his figure dissolving into a blurry silhouette. Wanda Rutkiewicz is right behind him. She's moving slower, battling gusts of wind that threaten to hurl her into the abyss. But then, at some point, maybe on pure instinct, she stops and looks back. Wanda sees them. It's the last time anyone will ever see Maurice and Liliane Berard alive. The couple is falling behind. They're moving incredibly slowly, as if wading through an invisible web. Dehydration and 2 nights spent above 8,000 meters have made their movements heavy, clumsy. They're stumbling through the mist, holding each other up, but their pace is dropping catastrophically. The gap between the front of the group and those falling behind widens with every passing second. 10 meters, 20, 50. Wanda wants to scream, to tell them to wait, but the wind smothers every sound, stuffing her mouth with snow. She watches as the figures of Maurice and Liliane grow fainter and fainter. First, the details of their gear disappear, then the outlines of their bodies, and finally, the white curtain of the storm drops between them for good, like the final act of a play. Visual contact is broken. In this howling chaos, the Berards are now alone, cut off from the only landmark leading to safety. They will never make it down to base camp. The story of their climb simply dissolves into the blizzard, right along with their fading shapes. In a wind like this, a boot print in the snow lasts for exactly 10 seconds before it's gone forever. That's how long K2 gives you to make a decision, and for them, that timer has just run out. Inside a whiteout, the very concept of space disappears. For Maurice and Liliane, their entire world has now shrunk to the space they can reach with an outstretched arm. They try to find the tracks left by Wanda and Michelle, but all they see is a clean, untouched sheet of ice. The hurricane is like a giant eraser, wiping away any hope of navigation. In these conditions, your sense of balance goes haywire. Climbers call it the ping-pong ball effect. You're surrounded by pure white. There's no up, no down, no horizon. Your brain, starved of oxygen, literally can't tell your feet where to step, whether it's onto solid ice or into thin air. And this is where the cruel physics of their decision to separate comes into play. Remember that rope they coiled up to move faster? Now, that decision has become a death sentence. If they were roped together, a fall from one could have been stopped by the other. That rope is the ultimate safety net, a physical lifeline. But they are on their own. In zero visibility and on steep, treacherous terrain, one wrong step, a single crampon slipping on a glaze of ice, becomes an uncontrollable slide. There's no one to pull on a safety rope, no one to stop the fall. It's just the two of them, alone together in the heart of a raging storm. We don't witness the fall itself, but the mountain, it tells the story for us through cold, hard facts. Liliane's body would later be discovered at the very foot of the wall on the glacier, 3,000 meters below where they were last seen. For investigators, the position of her body is irrefutable proof. It means they didn't freeze to death, waiting for help on the slope. They didn't fall into an eternal sleep inside a shelter. They fell. Most likely their exhausted muscles just gave out, or the treacherous ground simply crumbled from under their feet. In that moment, gravity takes hold, hurling their bodies down an icy chute. The speed builds in an instant. With no ice axe in hand and no strength left to self-arrest, there's almost no chance of clinging to the slope. The tragedy unfolds in a flash, maybe without even a scream, one that would have been swallowed by the roaring wind anyway. Their brilliant careers and their love story weren't cut short by an avalanche or a rockfall, but by disorientation, and the absence of that one vital lifeline they had sacrificed for speed. Sometimes surviving the mountain is harder than being left there forever, because you're the one who has to come down with the news that your friends are gone. Wanda Rutkiewicz and Michelle Parmentier, they win this lottery with death. They make it to the lower camps, frostbitten, pushed to their absolute limit, their faces and fingers blackened by the cold. Their physical wounds will heal, but the shadow of that storm will be frozen in their eyes forever. They are the only witnesses to the final hours of the world's highest couple. Their account is sparse and tragic. Fog, wind, emptiness. The mountain doesn't give back those it claims right away. 3 long, agonizing weeks of silence go by. Only when the storms finally die down does an Austrian expedition spot a patch of bright color at the very base of the south face. It's Liliane. Gravity knows no mercy. Experts confirm she fell from the maximum possible height, leaving her no chance at all. She is buried right there at the famous Gilkey Memorial on a rocky plateau that serves as the final resting place for those who challenged K2 and lost. Her name is now etched onto a metal plate, clinking in the wind alongside dozens of others. And Maurice? His was a different journey, one stretched out over time. A glacier is a river in slow motion. It holds its secrets for decades. Maurice Barrard vanishes from the world for 12 long years. It's not until 1998, when the ice thaws and shifts, that the mountain finally lets him go. His body is found far, far below. He's identified by the very gear he had so lovingly crafted in his own garage. It's a grim irony. His suit withstood the ravages of time and cold, but the strategy had failed its creator. Back in France, the news of the star couple's death lands like a bombshell, and grief quickly gives way to hard questions. The very newspapers that had been romanticizing their story just a day before were now changing their tune. Critics started asking the hard questions. Had the Barrards become prisoners of their own image? Did the pressure of the cameras, the obligations to their sponsors, force them to push upward when they should have been heading down? Their tragedy becomes a textbook case study in mountaineering. It led to a new, unwritten rule, one paid for with their lives. Never plan for a second night in the death zone. It's a mistake the human body simply doesn't forgive. But their story leaves behind more than just grief. Just look at the climbers of today. Many of them are tackling the world's highest peaks in down suits bearing the Valandre logo. The brand Maurice founded lived on. Barrard's engineering genius continues to save lives in the very same brutal conditions that claimed his own. Their legacy isn't just a windswept plaque below K2. It's the technology that allows humans to survive beyond the edge of possibility. The story of Maurice and Liliane remains a timeless reminder. The mountains may respect skill, but they will never, ever bow to human ambition.